Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video we're going to be returning once again to the Oathbreaker Paladin. I mentioned in the last video we looked at like Oathbreaker plus Hexblade. One of them was literally just one level of Hexblade. And I felt like those builds were both really good and were definitely a lot more optimized than today's builds are going to be. Today's are more like theme builds, but I do want to say I think that to play either of these builds would be like in an ongoing campaign would actually be really tough, because one of the builds we're going to look at is the Death Domain Cleric, and the other one is going to be multi-classing with the Necromancer Wizard. And the problem is that by the time we take, let's say, 7 levels of Oathbreaker to get Aura of Hate plus our Channel Divinity, and then say 6 levels of Necromancer Wizard to get our Undead Thrall's ability, so we can add our proficiency bonus to the damage of all our undead that we summon, right? You're already a 13th level character, and you're using like skeletons and zombies, which were great when you were low level. But at this point, you're 13th, and they're easily killed by AoE attacks. It's just not particularly potent at this point. And, you know, what is that Necromancer really bringing to us other than our level 6 ability? Right? Like if you look at the Necromancer, we get our Necromancy Savant, which cuts our scribing into our spellbook time by half and the cost by half. You know, I mean, it's basically a ribbon feature. It's nice, but it's not anything special. We also get Grim Harvest at level 2, but Grim Harvest requires that we kill things with spells to recover lost hit points. So basically, if you cast a leveled spell, has to be first level or higher, we kill something with that spell, we get twice the spell's level back in hit points, or 3 times if it's a necromancy spell. And you think, well, you know, I'm a frontline type of guy, right? I'm a paladin, I'm up there in the front lines, I'm going to be taking damage. This is a nice way to replenish them. The problem is, though, that it requires us to be killing things with our spells, not with like just any generic attack. Like if you compare that to a Fiend Warlock, for example, they're not recovering lost hit points, they're getting temporary hit points, which are a lot more replaceable now that we have things like, you know, Twilight Clerics. But they're getting that every time they get a killing blow, regardless of how they killed it. If we could add our melee damage in there, that would be fine. If we could use something like a Green Flame Blade or a Booming Blade, that would be fine. But it requires a leveled spell, and those are both cantrips. And just in general, it just doesn't really mesh with our style of play. And then everything else we're getting from Wizard, you know, like maybe we wanted the shield spell and stuff like that. Counter spell is nice. But, you know, I already looked at taking Hexblade Warlock. We could have gotten shield and counter spell from Warlock instead. You know, and we could have gotten things like Armor of Agathis, which might have been a really nice spell for a melee-focused character, right? The problem is that all we're really getting is that level 6 ability. So I just don't think that it's a very successful build to try to like play that out in a campaign. And frankly, I might still want 1 level of Hexblade, even on top of our 7+ Paladin and our 6 Necromancer, right? Because just being able to dump my strength or dex to, let's say strength, because we need 13 to multiclass in or out as a Paladin, right? So let's say just going with 13 strength and being able to focus on charisma with enough intelligence and constitution to be able to, you know, cast wizard spells and multiclass in or out of wizard. That's already a lot, you know? But at least if I can focus mostly on my charisma, it's not so bad. And if I'm using a lot of spells, like Shield doesn't care what my intelligence is, right? Absorb Elements doesn't care, you know? So there are a lot of benefits like that. If I take those kind of spells, we can at least get away with like maybe a 13 or 14 intelligence. But we can't dump intelligence, which I might have wanted to do, right? But, you know, I think that we could make it work. The problem is, though, that until we get to Wizard 6, we're just not really getting a lot that we couldn't have already gotten somewhere else, and I think would probably be better. But, all that being said, I think if we're in like a high-level one-shot, suddenly I think this becomes very doable, because now we don't have to suffer through playing 5 levels of Necromancer to get that level 6 ability, just so we can finally start adding our proficiency bonus to the damage of our undead. And so I think that this build can actually work in that capacity. I'm not saying you couldn't level this character in a campaign. I'm just saying I personally probably wouldn't want to. I just feel like there's just, at least I personally, probably because I spend so much time dungeon mastering as well, right? But I always have a million ideas for characters and only a limited number of campaigns to play them in. And I want to play something that's going to be like fun throughout, not something that's just going to start working at like 14th level, right? But if I'm starting in a 14th or 15th level adventure, especially if I'm only playing this character for 4 to 6 hours, suddenly I think that could be a really neat idea. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit more about some of the pluses of this build. Because there are some, right? Number one, being able to upcast things like summon undead. We talked about summon undead in the last video. Taking that again as an option becomes really, really strong. And, you know, being able to upscale that is nice. The problem Warlock has as well, specifically compared to the Wizard, or the Death Domain Cleric, which we'll talk about in a minute as well, is that at least, in this case, our Paladin levels and our other levels of Cleric or Wizard, whichever one, are combining together and stacking. So we will have higher level spell slots. Unlike the Warlock, where the Pact Magic slots are like their own thing. And then if we leveled Warlock up high enough, we could get like, you know, our Mystic Arcanum, but those are also their own separate thing, right? So we've got our Paladin spells, we've got Warlock spells, Pact slots, and we've got Mystic Arcanum, but none of them are really interchangeable. Whereas at least in this case, we would have stacking spell slots giving us some better spell slot progression if we just wanted to smite a lot. And the thing is, maybe I don't care about like the Animate Dead spell that much, right? Animate Dead, like we talked about in the last video, can be a real pain in the butt to actually physically try to use at a table. Yes, conceptually, we all get that having a bunch of skeletons, all benefiting from your aura hate, and getting the benefits of your proficiency bonus added to the damage sounds really cool. And then we start putting them on a map, and we realize that half our party members can't get where they wanted to go. And the Barbarian's now mad because he wasted his rage, because he raged, used it for one turn, killed his guy, and now can't get hit or get into combat to get hit because he's got a horde of skeletons in the way. Now, you know, that kind of stuff sucks. It's not very table friendly. Casting nice spells like Summon Undead is a little better. You could even combine it with things like Bless. I didn't talk about that last week, but you know, you have Bless in your spellbook. I realize it doesn't sound very Oathbreaker-ish to be buffing all your allies, but you know, you could target yourself, target your undead minion, and your summoned minion. I forgot, you could be controlling one with your Paladin Channel Divinity while also buffing him, and then buffing your summoned undead and buffing yourself, all with one great use of a first level spell slot. So that's actually pretty good. But like I said, to use this at high levels, I think would be a lot of fun. And in those cases, I think that adding in more Wizard levels isn't a bad thing. Adding in more Paladin levels isn't a bad thing. Especially if I'm in like a 20th level campaign, I would still probably take my 1 level Hexblade, probably 8 to 11 levels of Paladin, and then maybe the rest Wizard. Even 6 levels of Wizard, though, is probably going to be fine, right? If I just wanted Counterspell and a couple other things like that. Wanted my damage proficiency bonus added to the damage of my minions. You know, that's all right. Oathbreaker Cleric. So I feel like Oathbreaker is a little different than the Necromancer. This one is one that you could potentially play out. I still think, though, that kind of like the Necromancer, it'd probably work better as a one-shot. But that doesn't necessarily mean you would ever want to play it. So let's take a quick look at its abilities. Again, we do have the Animate Dead spell on the spell list, but we've already talked about Animate Dead, and we could have had that on the Oathbreaker spell list if we go to level 9 anyway, so that's not really like a special thing, right? We can already get that. We get bonus proficiencies. Again, not special because Paladin already gave us all these options. But we also get the level 1 ability of Reaper. So we learn 1 Necromancer cantrip of our choice from any spell list. I would probably recommend Toll the Dead. When the Cleric casts a Necromancer cantrip, so that one or any other Necromancer cantrip, right? that normally targets only one creature. The spell can instead target 2 creatures within range and within 5 feet of each other. Now, personally, I actually think this is a lot better than the Necromancer's Grim Harvest ability, because this one is one that I could see myself using if I can't get into melee range. And being able to hit 2 targets with my cantrip is way better than 1, right? So, you know, especially if I'm not maxing my wisdom, if I'm leaving my wisdom at 13 or 14, which I probably am going to have to do. Same problem we had with intelligence, only, you know, with a slightly better stat, though, because wisdom saves are a lot more important usually than intelligence. Or a lot more common. I shouldn't say they're more important. Getting feeble-minded sucks. So, you know, it's not that intelligence saves aren't important. They just don't come up very much, right? So, you know, I can probably get away with like 13 or 14 wisdom, but it means that things like this aren't going to be hitting very accurately because things are just going to make the saving throw more. But it does mean I could potentially hit 2, and it's an ability I don't want to be using a lot anyways. I'd rather get into melee range, obviously. But, you know, if I can't, then having this is a decent alternative. And I can see myself using this a lot more than using my spell slots from Grim Harvest to try to get killing blows on different targets and recover a few hit points. That just doesn't seem like it's going to happen for me. Anyways, we also get Channel Divinity, Touch of Death. Now, remember, if we're multi-classing Paladin and Cleric, we just get more Divinity options. We don't get more Channel Divinity uses. So, you know, that's always fun. But at least from the Oathbreaker Paladin, if we use our Control Undead ability, it lasts for 24 hours. So it is very likely we could have our Controlled Undead and then rest and get our Channel Divinity back again and be able to use it, you know, to crush stuff. So basically, when the Cleric hits a creature with a melee attack, the Cleric can use Channel Divinity to add extra necrotic damage, to the target. The damage equals 5 plus twice his or her Cleric level. So let's go back to, you know, let's compare it to the Necromancer, right? Well, just to use some approximate levels. Let's say we've once again got, like, say, 7 or 8 levels. We'll say 8 levels of Paladin, plus we've got 1 level of Hexblade because we wanted to be able to use Charisma, right? And then we've got, say, 6 levels of Cleric. Well, that means we're doing 12 plus the 5, so 17 necrotic damage on one of our weapon attacks. It's not a spell attack, so we can use this even while we're smiting things, using our Aura of Hate, you know, everything else, right? So let's say we use a longsword just as an example, right? Because we need a one-handed weapon, since we're using Hexblade in this example. We're going to get our weapon damage, plus, you know, plus 1 sword, plus 2 sword, whatever we happen to have potentially at this point, right? We are, you know, fairly high level, right? We're looking like a 14th or 15th level character. Probably have at least a plus 1 sword by now, if not better. So we're getting that. Then we're getting our Charisma bonus. You know, let's assume that it's a 20 Charisma, so that's a plus 5 there. Then we're getting another 5 from our Aura of Hate. Plus we're getting our Smites and 17 potentially more from our Channel Divinity if we want to use it here. And we're only 2 levels away from getting Divine Strike as a Cleric, which gives us another 1d8 to 1 attack per round. We could even potentially get improved Divine Smite still from Paladin, which would give us another 1d8 to all of the attacks. In other words, we can be hitting really hard without even needing, like, Great Weapon Mastery, Sharpshooter, any of that stuff, just because we've got so many bonuses all getting added on. The other thing I like about this Channel Divinity is that we don't have to use it until after we've already seen if it's a hit or not, right? So you're not gonna, I'm gonna use my Channel Divinity and then roll a 1, right? Doesn't happen. I mean, we could use it on a crit, but because it's just adding a flat amount of damage, not dice, it doesn't specifically scale with crits, so there's, you know, no inherent advantage. But, you know, you could. I mean, granted, if you're already smiting on that crit and doing a bunch of other die, there's every chance you could just kill a creature outright and waste your Channel Divinity. So maybe you'd want to specifically do it when you didn't crit. Who knows? But, you know, as a opening round, you know, you roll initiative and you nat 20 on your first attack, you're just like, ah! You know, and then you just, boom, smite for truckload of damage. Drop your channel divinity on there as well. Good times. Main thing is it just fits the theme of hitting stuff really hard with my weapon, which is what I'm trying to do anyways, you know. At level 6, we also get inescapable destruction, so we're able to channel negative energy and become more potent. Our necrotic damage dealt by the character's cleric spells and channel divinity options ignore resistance to necrotic damage. Now, unfortunately, that didn't include anything except for cleric spells, but so, you know, warlock spells, paladin spells, not on that list. It also didn't include our divine strike, which we're going to get in 2 levels, and does necrotic damage, of course. I don't know why they wouldn't have also included that. That's very unfortunate. Especially if we're fighting a lot of undead, a lot of them are resistant or immune to necrotic. So, you know, being able to ignore that resistance would have been nice. Anyways, that basically sums up the Death Domain Cleric. I do think that it's a pretty decent option as well. I think that really, if we compare the two, the Necromancer only really starts becoming good, in my opinion, once we have those 6 levels of Necromancer, right? And sure, we could do something like maybe we play a 2-level Paladin build where we just Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade a bunch and Smite, and then go way more Necromancer. But then we're A, not really even a Oathbreaker at all, but B, we're not taking advantage of the Oathbreaker channel divinities, which, you know, the good one, Control Undead, scales with our Paladin level, and we're not unlocking Aura of Hate, which I thought the whole idea was to add our proficiency bonus and Aura of Hate both to make our undead just like super great, you know? So I kind of need the both, which is at least 13 levels, and if I want to level a Hexblade, 14 levels. I think that in a high level one-shot, though, that is fine, right? But like I said, if you're not high enough to have everything in place, I just don't think it's very good at all. 14 plus, then it becomes very, very strong, right? Although everything at 14 levels plus is strong, so, you know, make of that what you will. I think the Death Domain Cleric is a little better. I could even potentially like see trying to level a character that way. I would personally rather just do one of the 2 builds we talked about last week with either, you know, Hexblade 1 and everything else Oathbreaker, or taking a bit more Hexblade or potentially a lot more Hexblade, but basically playing that same build where we're Hexblade 1, Oathbreaker 7, and then we go from there. We take the either more Paladin or we go more Warlock, right? I think both of those are just better builds to play. But you could play this Cleric one much the same way, where you just go to Oathbreaker 7 or 8 or whatever, right? Maybe we wanted the ASI, so don't take 7 as a hard cutoff. That's just, you know, approximation, right? And we got our Hexblade 1, and then maybe instead of going with more Warlock, we go more Cleric, which gives us better spell slot progression, better smites, gives us, you know, our channel divinity and stuff like that. I think that could be a decent option. I think that would be a fun character to play. It's very thematic. It's not terrible mechanically. It's just not as strong as some of the others are. The Wizard one, I think I would only play in a high-level one-shot where I'm able to have everything from the outset. Because like I said, we're just not getting anything from Necromancer until level 6. But anyways, well, I should probably mention other alternatives would include both the Undead and Undying Warlocks. But to me, both... Okay, so I want to be clear. The Undead from Van Ritten's Guide to Ravenloft is actually a pretty decent subclass. But if I want the theme, I feel like Cleric, like the Death Domain Cleric or the Necromancer are kind of already doing that. And unlike that one level of Hexblade, you know, a few levels or even a bunch of levels of Undead Warlock, it's just not really making anything special happen. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we got a Dread form. That's cool, right? And we can fear stuff and stuff like that. But we already kind of could do that with our other channel divinity anyways. You know, and then we're not able to just really focus on charisma, which you kind of need to do in a character like this, right? So I just, you know, and that's the good one of the two. The Undying Warlock is, you know, widely considered to be one of the worst Warlock subclasses in the entire game, an opinion that I sadly do share. You know, It did come to us from the Sword Coast Adventures guide, though, so no real surprise there. That is the book that almost single-handedly tries to reverse power creep. It's like, oh, you thought those options were pretty plain and vanilla. Well, look at ours. Less powerful than the Player's Handbook, almost across the board. Then we get, Xanathar hashes, of course, but what do you do? Anyways, though, I thought we'd at least mention them since they are subclasses fitting in that theme. I just feel like they don't really offer much. If I wanted Warlock, we've already got a better option. And of course, sadly, the option is Hexblade. I know, Hexblade all the time. It's unfortunate. But, it is what it is, right? I'm not saying you couldn't make, an Undying Warlock Paladin combination work, right? If nothing else, you still have spell slots coming back on a short rest from your Warlock. You could do it. You can make it work if that's what you're determined to do. I'm just saying that I think that there's stronger and better options. But anyways, that's everything for this video. Thank you for watching. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. I do, look, as negative as I've kind of been in both the builds on this video, I do think that they'd be very fun to play, right? But I also, D&D is the kind of game where you could be playing a character for a year or two in a long ongoing campaign. And I don't want to sound like I'm giving people some false hope for a build that then they play and they're like, you know what? I mean, it was okay. I liked my character, he had a cool personality, but it didn't really work the way I wanted it to, or I didn't get to use my necromancer abilities to the end of the campaign. That kind of stuff really sucks if you're not aware of it. And you can invest so much time into a character and then just, really feel like the character just didn't perform the way you wanted. And I just don't want people to have to, experience that, at least not as minimally as possible, right? So that's why I say that while some of these theme builds can be a lot of fun, and I really do like this. I mean, I do a lot of suboptimal builds on this channel, right? And let's face it, I do a lot of videos, and a lot of them are build videos, and not every build possible can be the best build, right? There's only a handful of really, really just builds that are clearly better than others. Doesn't mean that the other builds can't be a lot of fun. And that's why I still like doing videos like this one, right? I do like a lot of these cool themed ideas, It's just I also am aware that if you're going to spend, one night a week for a year and a half playing this character at 4 to 5 or 6 hours per game session, or however long your sessions end up being, I just want you to have fun with the character. And if you, to me, the best character is the one where I'm able to combine a cool idea with an interesting personality, and also the character functions the way I want it to. It doesn't mean he has to be the best character ever mechanically, right? In fact, a lot of my characters specifically, I'm not trying to do that always, right? But they do have to be able to perform at a certain level of expectation. If my character is just doing a quarter of the damage of another character, but I specifically built the guy to do damage, well, I'm going to feel pretty worthless in the party. If I built a character that I want to be able to kind of do a lot of crowd control, but then because I have too many stats to focus on, I can't, half my saving throws, everything's making it because my spell save DC sucks. Well, again, I'm not able to do the role that I'd envisioned for my character. So to me, the best characters are the ones that the concept and the actual mechanics all come together to make a great, playing experience, right? And so I think sometimes it's really easy to get focused on mechanics and then not have an interesting character, or it's really interesting character that we get focused on, and then the character just doesn't perform well because we hadn't bothered to look at the fact that we're going to need, 7 levels of Paladin and 6 levels of Necromancer before we actually get the combo we wanted online, right? So, that's why it's good to talk about that kind of stuff sometimes and just kind of make people aware. But like I said, in a high-level one-shot, where you're starting at 14th, 15th, 20th level, whatever, I think that character would be a blast to play. And, I think it would perform extremely well. I mean, granted, every 20th level character performs well, so like I said, not a huge stretch there. But, I think it would be a lot of fun. And it would be a cool concept that would definitely be worth playing in a high-level one-shot. But anyways, that's everything. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.